Some of what we hear about climate change might leave us feeling overwhelmed and worried about the future. And it's really important to honor those feelings and just take care of ourselves. But it's also important to know that that bad news, well, it's not the whole story. In this crisis, there is opportunity. Our climate future can be one of flourishing. And that's the part of the story that doesn't often get told. Imagine we zoom ahead to 2050. Think for a sec how old you'll be then. It's hard to believe it, but my own kids will be in their 30s. Eee. Okay, are you ready? Imagine this. You step out your front door and there's greenery everywhere. Cities are working with nature to absorb carbon and pollution. The air smells fresh. It's sunny, but the trees make the streets feel cool. You notice bees buzzing in the garden beds on your corner, and you said a little thank you as you reach down and pick some fresh mint. You pass by the greenhouse at your old high school, where students are tending young sprouts as part of their internship on urban agriculture. Many of the graduates go on to work at the booming vertical farming industry. Some of these greens are sent to the seniors' home next door, and in turn, some of the seniors lead cooking classes for the students. You hop on the rapid transit line. It used to take forever to get across town, but with the new dedicated lanes, it's really easy to move around. Your parents still own that old electric car you encouraged them to buy back in the day, but you've never needed to get one because there are so many options for moving around by transit, e-scooter, bikes, or by foot. You hop off the train to meet an old friend. You joined the Youth Climate Corps together right after you finished school. Your project involved retrofitting old, leaky homes with electric heat pumps to make them more comfortable and reduce fossil fuel use. It was in what had been one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, but now it's flourishing. There was just so much work to be done, retrofitting buildings, working in clean energy, and managing green infrastructure, that there was no shortage of jobs. And you joined a big campaign led by young people to make sure that these jobs were available to everyone across the city, and that they paid a living wage. You and your friend make your way to a patio on a pedestrian street. It feels alive. There are delivery bikes passing through, a couple of older folks playing chess, and groups of friends walking around together. You look out at the city that you helped shape, and you can't help but feel a little bit proud. Now, that's just one way of imagining the future, but all of that really could happen. We can create healthier, more affordable cities for everyone, all with technology that already exists. In fact, these changes are already underway. For example, students learning to grow fresh produce in school and sending those greens to a nearby senior's home. Well, that's already happening in New Murnum, Alberta. And buildings that incorporate greenery to clean the air and stay cool. Check out this amazing apartment building in Milan. Around the world, cities are building rapid transit and bike lanes and wide sidewalks to move people, not cars. For example, the city of Montreal turned more than a dozen commercial streets into pedestrian zones. The results? More walking and biking, safer streets, and cleaner air. And the streets attract more visitors, which creates a boost for small businesses nearby. The thing I love best when thinking about climate solutions is how we can use the shift away from fossil fuels as an opportunity to make the world a better place all around. A world that promotes well-being for everyone. So how do we do that? Well, to stabilize the climate, we need to stop carbon emissions, work with nature to help get things back into balance, and prioritize justice and equity as we move through this transition. Scientists say that keeping warming to 1.5 degrees is our best shot at avoiding the worst climate impacts. And remember, we've already warmed the planet by 1.2 degrees, so this means we have to act fast. Every fraction of a degree means real impacts for people here and around the world. To do this, we need to cut our carbon emissions by half by 2030. That's within this decade. And then we need to get to zero emissions by 2050. What does that mean? Well, burning fossil fuels releases carbon pollution. So number one, we need to stop using fossil fuels. From driving to heating our homes to growing food and making stuff. A lot of the things in our world today are built around using fossil fuels like natural gas, coal, and gasoline. But we've already started to disentangle those fossil fuels from everyday life. Let's explore a few examples, starting with how we move around. Transportation is responsible for about a quarter of Canada's overall carbon emissions, and the impacts of all that driving go well beyond climate change. Driving also creates a lot of air pollution that makes people sick, but we have better options. One solution is to swap out polluting gas-powered engines for cleaner technology like electric vehicles. And it's happening. EVs are becoming so good that demand for them is outpacing supply. Now, don't let anyone tell you that all we need to do is get everyone driving EVs and boom, we've solved the climate crisis. Obviously not. For one, mining the minerals for batteries is harmful for ecosystems and people. Of course, digging up fossil fuels is also harmful for ecosystems and people. But there's also the issue of space. Today in your city, chances are roads and parking lots take up more than a third of all land area. That is a lot. Imagine if we used that land for housing or gardens or sports fields instead. So we also need to think about how we're designing our cities so that we give people lots of great options so they don't have to rely on their cars in the first place. And yeah, cars are so normal right now, it can be hard to imagine a world where we don't need them so much. But around the world, we've seen that when you build rapid transit and safe bike lanes and pedestrian areas, people use them. Just look at Copenhagen. 50% of all trips to school and to work are taken by bike. But it wasn't always that way. Ridership has been steadily increasing since the city started investing in a network of simple, safe, and connected bike routes that make it easy to get around by bike. Okay, so that's driving. Let's look at another example, buildings. Across Canada, buildings account for about 12% of climate pollution, but when you zoom into cities like Montreal, Calgary, and Toronto, it's more like 50 to 65%. Why? Well, because buildings still rely on burning fossil fuels like natural gas to heat space, make hot water, and even cook food. But we have options to phase out fossil fuels here too. We can make our buildings more efficient, so we use less energy overall, and we can switch to cleaner technology that runs on electricity instead of fossil fuels. Heat pumps do both. They're 3 to 4 times more efficient than gas furnaces, and they're powered by electricity. And bonus, they also work as air conditioners in the summer. Now we're going to need a lot more electricity to power this big clean energy transition, about double the supply we currently have in Canada. But the good news is that renewable energy from sources like the sun, the wind, geothermal energy, or tides, it's growing really rapidly. In fact, it's actually cheaper right now to build a new solar farm with energy storage than a polluting gas-fired power plant. Renewable energy is cleaner for people and the planet. And because it's distributed, that means it's spread out, it can also make our energy system more resilient when it comes to extreme weather. If an ice storm knocks out power in one area, say, the entire grid isn't affected, and people can get help faster. When renewable energy projects are owned directly by the community, it gives them more control over their energy security. For example, many remote communities rely on expensive and polluting diesel for heat and power. In 2016, a devastating diesel spill in Bella Bella, British Columbia, prompted members of the Heiltsuk Nation to look for better ways to power their community. They installed solar panels, they replaced diesel furnaces with heat pumps. This reduced their dependency on imported fossil fuels, and it made the air cleaner, and it also made energy more affordable. Each home is now saving about $1,500 per year. Oh, and it also made a big difference for the climate, avoiding 2,000 liters of polluting diesel per home per year. Indigenous-led clean energy solutions like this one are an important step towards reconciliation in Canada. And there are already 200 clean energy projects in Indigenous communities across the country. Okay, so we've talked about how we can swap out fossil fuels from our everyday lives and how we can create new clean energy using renewables. So that's the part about stopping fossil fuel pollution at its source. But there's another important part to all this. Number 2, we also need to work with nature to draw down carbon emissions and help us get back into balance. One of the best solutions to absorb carbon might be right outside your window, a tree. Trees take in carbon and store it in their bodies. That's called a carbon sink, and nature is really, really good at this. Protecting and restoring nature can actually get us 1/3 of the way towards reducing our global carbon emissions. So what does that look like? Well, everything from protecting old growth forest and restoring wetlands to adding nature into our cities, which has the added benefit of protecting us from flooding, since green spaces can absorb extra water. And of course, more greenery where we live just makes it cool in the summer, but it also makes us happier and healthier overall. Growing food is another big part of this. Agriculture currently accounts for almost 10% of carbon emissions in Canada. But lots of farmers are adopting regenerative farming practices, which don't depend on fertilizers made from fossil fuels. Regenerative farming creates healthy living soil that can store loads and loads of carbon. And number 3, finally, we need to make sure that this transition is fair and brings everyone along. Remember when we were imagining what the future might look like? That lower carbon world was also more affordable, healthier, and more joyful. Investing in transit, building retrofits and green infrastructure can create decent work for communities who've been harmed by climate injustice. It can reduce the health burden and improve well-being for everyone. To do that, it requires that we follow the lead of impacted communities. As they say, when you're closer to the problem, you're closer to the solutions. Addressing climate change gives us an important opportunity to make the world more fair. So let's recap. To stabilize the climate, we need to stop carbon emissions by weaning ourselves off fossil fuels. And we need to work with nature to help get things back into balance. And taking action on climate can also help us achieve other things we want anyway: better health, vibrant communities, energy security, and prosperity for everyone. Now, some of these changes might seem like they're pretty big, but I hope that we've shown you that we have the solutions already. And this transition to a healthier, more just world is already happening. And what seems like a big change today might seem, normal not so long from now. The truth is, the world is always in transition. Change is always happening. Just look at how digital tools have totally reshaped our lives. I remember life before the internet. Can you remember a time when cat memes weren't a thing? Maybe not. And yeah, things that seem wild to imagine right now might just be how we do things. I've heard that when indoor toilets were first introduced, about a century ago, people thought it was bonkers. They said it will never catch on. Can you imagine thinking that indoor plumbing was weird? I can't. Your kids might find it strange that when you grew up, lots of people had no choice but to waste hours every day driving a vehicle that spewed out poisonous exhaust fumes that made people sick. There are things we do now in the carbon-based economy that just don't make sense. Making a better world is about giving people more choice. It means more options to live in a way that supports our health and well-being, creates more beauty and joy, and builds community resiliency. And the good news is that millions of people are already working on creating this better world. Whether it's installing renewable energy, practicing regenerative agriculture, designing efficient, comfortable, and beautiful buildings, or supporting people power in their own communities, there are so many ways to be part of making this beautiful future a reality. This decade matters. What we do these next few years will determine the shape of our lives for years to come. So imagine your best version of 2050 and then work on making that world come true. Okay, so if you're in a group, here are a few discussion questions. We talked about a lot of different solutions. Which one stood out for you? And think of an issue in your community. Is there a way to address it and climate together? And finally, what are the ways that we can make sure our climate-safe future advances equity and brings everyone along?